Am I an emotional fool for allowing my estranged father to move in with me? I, 31-year-old male, am an engineer working at a multinational company and live alone in New York. I am a self-made man and not obligated to anyone, not even my parents. My mother passed away when I was 12, and I lived with my father, Robert, 64-year-old male, during my teenage years. Despite having resources, he didn't help me when I was struggling in college, the toughest time of my life. Now, I am well off, and my father is retired, his health is failing, and he is in need of financial support. Last week, he reached out to me and asked me to take him in, help him financially, and take care of him. Seeing him reminded me of the pain I went through, and I told him that I am not responsible for looking after him. However, later on, I had to let him move in with me. Background: my father was a merciless man. He did what he wanted and never cared about others, not even his family. When I was in college, my financial situation was not good, and I was even unable to pay my tuition fee. At that time, my father was earning enough that he could support me easily, but when I asked him for help, he refused, giving the reason that he had tough love for me and that hardship would shape me into a better person. I said that if you don't want to help me, at least lend me some money so that I could focus on studying, and promised that I would return his money just after my graduation. But he said, no, you would have to manage things on your own. My father believed that challenges would shape me into a better person, but I was nearly breaking. I did many part-time jobs, borrowed from friends, and above all, skimped on many meals. My dream of becoming an engineer seemed to be fading away, but I didn't give up. My father knew how difficult it was for me to manage things, but he didn't help me. Instead, he kept on watching from the sidelines. I persevered through the challenges, and after a tough journey, my efforts finally paid off. I was admitted to a top-notch university, Fordham, for my master's degree on a Fulbright scholarship. It covered all my tuition fees and offered me a handsome amount as a stipend. I was very happy after winning the scholarship, but I didn't tell my father about it. Instead, I told him that I was moving to New York to join a company for an internship, and that the internship would open the door to many opportunities for me. I didn't because I wanted to surprise him, but when I told him about the internship, he said, "Internship? Free work? You deserve it." His response hurt me and cut me deep. That was when I realized that his tough love was just a way to avoid helping me. Disappointed, I left for New York without informing my father and seeing him, and embarked on my new journey, alone but excited. Fast forward to today, I have a stable job, a cozy apartment, and a somewhat luxurious lifestyle, while my father is retired and all his sources of income have dried up. He lost most of his savings in gambling and other activities. Last week, my father reached out to me. His health was failing, and he wanted to move in with me. He also needed financial support. When he asked to move in with me, I refused and asked him to leave my place and not come here again. I sarcastically told him that I had tough love for him, so he should face the merciless world alone, as it would make him a better person. He left my apartment red-faced without arguing or saying anything to me. After my father left, I became absorbed in my routine, but at night, when I went to bed, a feeling of guilt gripped me. My inner self started cursing me and telling me that what I did was wrong. Even though he didn't help me when I needed him most, he was still my father, with whom I had an eternal relationship. Above all, he was old, sick, and needed help, and I realized that I was doing to him what he did to me a decade ago. These thoughts continued to echo in my mind for hours, and after pondering on it thoughtfully, I decided to take him in and help him with what he needed. In the morning, I called my father and requested him to shift with me. Initially, he seemed to be hesitant, but when I insisted, he agreed and moved in with me. When I met him, I saw his eyes held regret, and later on he accepted that he was wrong and said he wished he had been there for me. As I listened to him, a flood of memories from my past came rushing back, reminded me that he was the same person who brought me up from an infant to a young boy and paid for my school. I even remembered the day when I had love for him. However, after my boyhood, he deserted me, perhaps to make me stronger, but it was his mistake and a wrong choice. Whatever, I forgave him. When I let him move in with me, my father was not the same person who turned his back on me. He was vulnerable, weak, seeking help and financial support. He apologized many times, and I also realized forgiveness wasn't weakness. I decided to give him a chance, not out of obligation, but because I want to heal the long-fractured bond. I have decided to navigate the next portion of time together, father and son, flawed but willing. However, When I shared my story with my friends, they said that I was an emotional fool and that my father had come to me to live off my money. They said that my father is not the problem. The real issue is that I am an emotional fool, and because of this tendency, I might make some blunders in my life. I know my father was wrong in the past, but now he is not. But I am confused whether I am really an emotional fool. So, do you think that I am an emotional fool? And is my decision to let my father move in with me wrong or right? AITAH for wishing that my father was dead, for relying on a 20-year-old me for money? About 6 months ago, I, a 20-year-old male, had a heated argument with my father, Lucas, a 49-year-old male, during which I called him a failure and wished that he was dead for depending on me for money. Since then, he has not visited me, and we have had no contact. I believe that I was justified in saying so, but sometimes I think I overreacted to my father's demands. For context, 4 years ago, my mother, who was a doctor, died in a car accident. At that time, I was 16. After some time of her passing away, our family lawyer told me that my mother had been investing in a trust fund, and I was the only beneficiary of that fund. However, I could withdraw the money only after turning 18. The lawyer also suggested me not to tell my father about the fund. When I asked why, he told me that my mother had a conversation with him that my dad will try to claim the money or force me to give it to him. I believe it was because my father had never been a responsible person, particularly when it comes to finances. 2 years ago, I turned 18 and had the access of trust fund. After receiving the money, I was very happy that it would help me pay my tuition fees and cover other expenses. However, when my father found out about this fund, he asked me to lend him half of the amount I had received as loan. I was hesitant because I knew he would not repay the loan. Despite my reservations, I reluctantly agreed, but on the condition that he would pay for my tuition fees. Mind that the tuition's fees were less than what I gave him. He agreed and actually paid for 2 semesters. With the remaining money, I rented a studio apartment near the campus, bought a car, the latest iPhone, and books for my studies, and invested the rest in S&P 500. I kept the small amount of money I had left in a bank, and also started working a part-time job to ensure I would not run out of money in the future, especially during my university years. Fast forward to 6 months ago, my dad came to me and told me that he could not afford my university tuition and asked me to cover it. I was shocked to hear this because I had already paid him for my fees. I told him that he was responsible for paying the tuition fee since I was a broke university student, working part-time to support myself. Instead of understanding my situation, he started scolding me for not having any money left and claimed that the money I used for moving out and that I had given to him was his wife's money, and that I and he had an equal right to that. So, he was not responsible for paying my fee. In reality, he was telling a lie because his name was not mentioned anywhere in the legal documents of the fund. Not only this, he didn't even know about the fund. Initially, I tried to make him understand that he would have to pay for my educational expenses. However, when he plainly refused, I was fed up and called my dad a failure of a father for stealing from a broke son, and I wished that he had died instead of Mom that night. When I said this, a sudden silence came over his face, one that I had never seen on his face before that day. Suddenly, all his body gestures stopped, and he sat down on the chair. 2 to 3 drops of tears rolled down his cheeks, and after around 10 minutes, he left my apartment in silence. He has not contacted me since then, but 2 months ago he deposited my university fee without informing me. Initially, I thought he was trying emotional tricks to extract money from me, but now I think he was not. Sometimes, I think I don't know that man, and that I overreacted by calling him a failure. However, I am not sure whether I am wrong or right in this particular situation, because my reaction seems natural, at least to me, given what he did. Now I request Reddit fam to tell me, am I the jerk for wishing that my father was dead? And what should I do? AITAH for refusing to change my last name to please my ex's fiancé? I am a 34-year-old female. My ex-husband, Booker, 35-year-old male, has been dating Ava, 26, for 3 years. After being married for 12 years, we got divorced 5 years ago when we realized that we were not compatible and that our decision to marry was influenced by our parents. We believed that at the time of our marriage, we were not mature enough to make such a decision. even though we had reached the legal age of marriage, according to Indiana's law. It was a mutual decision to separate, and we chose to prioritize our 2 children, so we started living in the same building, but in different apartments for co-parenting responsibilities. Though it is uncommon in the USA, it was our choice for the welfare of our children. Everything was going smoothly until Booker's girlfriend moved in with him a year ago. Previously, we used to celebrate our kids' birthdays, special days at school, and holidays together. And we went out to dinner many times with our children. However, things have changed since she moved in with him. He would not even sit near me on our kids' special days after her arrival. I have always been good and nice to this woman. However, my children have repeatedly expressed in front of me that they don't like her, but they never talked to her with disrespect. When I talked to my ex, he told me that she wasn't a fan of me, and she has said she feels intimidated while sitting with or talking to me. When I asked how I am intimidating to her, my ex-husband told me that she was saying that I have a resting bitch face that makes her uncomfortable. It was strange to hear all this from a girl I have always been respectful to, and above all, it was insulting and humiliating. My ex and she got engaged over this Christmas. After hearing about this, our children, the daughter especially, were thrilled. They feel that their father can't make such an important decision without even informing them in advance. My children were very hurt. Yesterday, my ex called me and asked me to change my last name back to my maiden name. When I asked why, he told me that his fiancée, Ava, says she feels distant from him when I use his last name, and she wanted to use the same name after their marriage. I reminded him that we agreed at the time of our divorce that I could keep his last name until I wanted or felt the need to change it, and the same was listed in our paperwork. I told him that I don't want to have a last name different from that of my children. Also, I told him that as I don't have an intention to remarry, if this were the case, I would have changed my last name. He said I was being unreasonable and requested me to do this to make his fiancée happy. I said I am not responsible for her happiness. I want only my children and me to have the same last name. So, AITAH for refusing to change my last name to please my ex's fiancé? AITAH for asking my roommate's girlfriend to contribute to rent or leave the apartment? I, a 26-year-old male, live in a duplex with my friend John, a 25-year-old male. I pay reduced rent because my salary is very low. Initially, my friend had no problem with me when he invited me to live with him as a roommate. But things have changed now. Yesterday, I had an argument with his girlfriend because she has been living here for the last 2 months without contributing to bills, and she always makes a mess in the bathroom and kitchen. Because of her stay, it seems like I live in hell. I told her to either contribute to the rent or leave the apartment. Due to this argument, my friend yelled at me, saying I was jealous of him because I don't have a girlfriend and that I was dependent on him. He also said, "Get out of the apartment in the morning or bear my girlfriend." Background: my roommate John and I are from the same city, Gettysburg, and we were friends in high school. He has a bachelor's degree in IT, but unfortunately, I am a high school dropout. John has been living in New York for 4 years and is doing well for himself. I, on the other hand, recently moved to the city and am working as a shelf packer on a very low salary. The salary is so low that I can't mention it here. Before living with him, I lived alone in a studio apartment, but I found it difficult to afford the rent. When John found out about my situation, he offered me to move in with him as a roommate. Initially, I was happy about the offer, but when I learned about the rent of his apartment, it was more than double that of my studio apartment. I told him that moving in with him would increase my expenses because the rent of his apartment was very high. He knew my situation, so he offered me to move in with him at a reduced rent. He mentioned that we had good times in high school, and he could do at least this for me. He also promised that he would help me secure a job with a reasonable salary. So I moved in with him 7 months ago. Though I pay reduced rent, a large chunk of my salary goes towards the rent. John's girlfriend, Emily, a 24-year-old female, usually visits us at the apartment and stays for days. Her visits are always problematic for me because she causes a hassle when I am getting ready, takes too much time in the shower and bathroom, uses all the hot water, leaves hair in the sink, and sometimes misplaces my daily use items. I hate all these things, but I never said anything to her, thinking that it might hurt my roommate, the person who let me live with him at a reduced rent and was helping me find a good job. However, for the last 3 months, she has been here so often that there is a noticeable increase in our electricity and water bills. Even though I pay a reduced bill, it is still too much for me. This is not because the bill itself is too high, but because my salary is very low. Considering all of this, I decided to talk to my roommate about the increasing bills caused by his girlfriend's long stays. However, I rarely see him with enough free time to discuss this issue. As a result, I chose to speak with his girlfriend since I see her almost daily. About a week ago, I had a conversation with her and explained the situation, asking her to consider changing her habits and addressing her extended stays that were driving up our bills. 2 days ago, I received the electricity bill, which was significantly higher than the previous month. It surprised me because it was nearly half of my salary. I couldn't understand why there was so much electricity being used. Upon seeing this bill, I decided it would be best to talk to my roommate over the weekend. Otherwise, my entire salary would go towards paying for his girlfriend's bills. However, when I returned from the gym to take a shower and prepare for work, I found the shower occupied. I asked her to come out quickly, but she insisted on taking more time. Since I was running late, I hurried to the gym to shower and get ready for work. As I left for work, she was still in the shower, and the water was continuously running. While heading to work, I thought, what am I paying for if I have to shower at the gym? When I returned home, my roommate was at work as usual, and there was smoke and a smell in the apartment. The messed up kitchen ruined my evening. In a rush of anger, I asked her to come to the living room. She came out of the kitchen asking, "What is the problem?" I said, "You are the problem." Then, I told her straightforwardly that I could not bear her anymore. I informed her that she needed to find her own apartment, or contribute to the bills and stop all this nonsense. Almost yelling at me, she said she was living with her boyfriend, and he was covering her expenses, so she was not dependent on me. I interrupted her and pointed out that I pay more than 40% of the bills and room rent, and she was essentially living here for free. The small portion of rent that her boyfriend covers, which is more than what I contribute, does not justify her extended stay with us. She got upset after hearing this and threatened me that she would see me when her boyfriend returns. I said, "Let him return, and I will see him." After the argument with her, I went to bed and fell asleep. Around 1 a.m., I was awakened by my roommate. In my half-awake state, I saw him yelling at me, accusing me of being jealous of him because I didn't have a girlfriend, and claiming that he had been covering my expenses for over 6 months. I told him that she was the one who provoked me to speak to her in that manner because she always messes up the kitchen and washroom. I asked him why she was living here without paying and all the issues I have mentioned in the post above. He didn't give weight to my concerns and said, "Get out of the apartment in the morning or bear my girlfriend." This was very humiliating for me, and I never expected this from my high school friend. My concerns are 100% justified, but I am not sure if the way I conveyed them was right or wrong. So, AITAH for asking my roommate's girlfriend to contribute to rent or leave the apartment? AITAH for telling my brother that his disease doesn't make him special? I, 16-year-old female, have an older brother, Justin, 17-year-old male, who has ADHD. He believes he can do anything and expects no one to question his actions. He often makes a mess and blames it on his condition. In contrast, I am always scolded, even if I don't make much of a mess at home. It is basically proof that my parents oversympathize with him and discriminate against me. Last month, while our parents were out, my brother and his friends decided to have a small party. Initially, they planned a potluck, but later on, they changed their plan and decided to cook at our home. They also decided to record a video of the cooking process. I felt happy for him, as he was finally getting somewhere with friends and a social life. His friends came over with mac and cheese, tuna, avocado, and other random ingredients. They started recording and mixing all these together, also using a bunch of flour and 2 eggs to cook up something that they put in the oven. After their party, the whole house smelled awful, and the kitchen counter was cracked. The sitter and I had to open all the windows and sit outside for hours. When we came back, my brother went to walk his friend home, and we found eggs on the counter water, tuna juice everywhere, and something rotting. It took a lot of nudging to get him to clean, and he still did a half-assed job. I told my parents about the situation, and they said they would handle it. When our parents got home, he received a 2-minute lecture, and they moved on. Lectures don't affect him, and he continues to do things anyway. I thought they would at least take away his devices. Later that evening, my brother decided to show our parents his funny video, and I watched in horror as they contaminated the kitchen's flour, broke eggs, and wasted a lot of food items. When our parents did nothing after watching the video, I started yelling at my brother about how he wasted about $40 worth of food that could have gone to someone in need. He responded, "Well, my disease was kicking in that day, so it doesn't matter." When our parents learned about me yelling at my brother, they said I overreacted and that it wasn't a big deal, and now I'm in trouble with them. My friends say I was in the right. I need an unbiased opinion. AITAH? Should I end my engagement with my fiancé who raped me while I was drunk? I, now a 20-year-old female, am confused about whether I should break up with my boyfriend, 𝐒𝐒, now a 21-year-old male, who had intercourse with me when I was drunk, breaking the pledge that we would not engage in a physical relationship until marriage. For context, I belong to a Christian family from South Carolina, and my boyfriend comes from a Muslim family. However, I am liberal and believe that all religions are equal and more or less the same, and one can choose to follow any of them or none. 𝐒𝐒 was also liberal and enjoyed listening to music, hanging out with his female friends, and occasionally drinking. It can be said that he was not a practicing Muslim, but his parents were practicing their religion. In 2021, I, then, joined the University of California, where I met 𝐒𝐒, then 19, and we soon became good friends. After some time, I realized that I was in love with him, and I decided to propose to him. One day, I proposed to him, but he seemed hesitant and didn't give a definite response to my proposal. When I asked why he neither accepted nor rejected my proposal, he said that he liked me but cannot marry me because of religious differences between us. It was disappointing for me because he was the first person I had proposed to. In the evening, I started studying about Islam, particularly about the marriage laws in Islam, and I found that according to Islamic laws, a Muslim man can marry women from among the people of the book, which means Christians, Jews, and others who believe in revealed books. I told this to 𝐒𝐒 and asked him why he refused to enter a relationship with me. He said that while it was true that a Muslim man can marry a Christian woman and that he could give serious thought to my proposal, his parents would not agree because they believed Christianity had been changed by Christians, and now Muslims cannot marry Christian girls. It was a strange reasoning 𝐒𝐒 gave, but I didn't argue with him because I didn't want to spoil our friendship and the slim chance of him accepting my proposal in the future. And despite his parents' views about interreligious marriage, I asked 𝐒𝐒 to discuss the matter with them, hoping they might agree to our marriage. He agreed, but said his parents were out of town for a week and he would talk to them when they returned. I said, okay, and then spent the whole next week delving into research on interreligious marriages. From the internet, I found that many Muslim men, and of course women, had indeed married non-Muslims. When his parents returned home, 𝐒𝐒 told me that he had discussed our potential marriage with them, but they refused to accept our union. Instead, they suggested that I should convert to Islam if I wanted to marry their son. I pointed out that many Muslim men and women marry non-Muslims in the USA, so why couldn't we do the same? I told him that we were consenting adults and should not have to seek permission from others to get married. 𝐒𝐒 replied that his parents were not just others, they were his parents, and he was not willing to marry someone against their wishes. He became a little angry and said that the only way I could marry him was by converting to Islam. We both remained silent for a few minutes, and then I said I needed time to think about it, and would tell him my decision later. When I thought about it thoroughly, I realized that it is very easy to give lectures about secularism on social media and criticize people for being too religious. Though I believed in interreligious marriage and had no problem with whichever religion one follows, it was not an easy decision for me to publicly declare myself as a Muslim, particularly because I was living with my conservative Christian family. However, I didn't want to lose 𝐒𝐒 at any rate, so we tried our best to convince his parents multiple times, but all in vain. After 3 months of intense mental struggle, I made the tough decision to convert to Islam because I couldn't bear the idea of not having 𝐒𝐒 in my life. When I told my decision to 𝐒𝐒, he suddenly became very happy and asked me to do the conversion formalities ASAP. Then, in the evening, we met 𝐒𝐒's parents, and told them that I was ready to convert to Islam. They called a local mosque's prayer leader, known as an imam in the Muslim community, and we had the conversion ceremony. After it, the imam, Anil's parents, and other Muslim girls who had come to see my conversion congratulated me for entering Islam. They all seemed very happy about my conversion, but I was not excited because of my conversion. Instead, I was happy because the path for our marriage had been paved. My parents, siblings, and no one from my social circle knew about my conversion to Islam. I told Anil's parents not to share the videos and pictures they had taken during my conversion ceremony on social media, and also requested them not to mention it to my parents when they would meet them. I didn't want to incur the wrath of my parents and strain my relationship with them. After all this, the next week, our parents met, and then we got engaged soon. However, we decided to get married after completing our education, perhaps 2 years later. During our engagement, we also made the decision to abstain from sex until our marriage because we wanted to save ourselves for our wedding day. Despite this, we still enjoyed romantic moments and would sometimes sleep together, with Anil holding me close all night. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago, we decided to go on a 1-week trip to Angeles National Forest with our friends. The trip was fantastic, but the last night turned out to be terrible. That night is the reason I'm here on Reddit, writing this lengthy post. On the last night, we had a fantastic party on the hotel terrace. We enjoyed a variety of dishes, from mozzarella sticks to barbecue, and danced the night away with plenty of pegs of Captain Morgan. Anil also had 2 to 3 pegs, but he didn't drink too much. I don't remember how many pegs I had, but I finally fell down fully drunk, and Anil took me to the room. When I was drunk asleep, Anil, who was not under the influence, had intercourse with me. When I woke up in the morning, I felt pain in my lower body. When I got out of the bed, I saw red stains on the bedsheet, and I soon understood what had happened at night. After knowing this, I went baffled and started weeping. At that time, my fiancé was taking a bath. When he came out, I asked him why he did all this when we had decided not to have sex before our marriage. He quickly said that he did all this with my consent, and he asked me to remember when he requested me to break our pledge made on our engagement, and I agreed. However, I don't remember anything. The last thing I remember is that I was making a peg for Anil. Having intercourse with someone who is under the influence is rape, and that is what Anil did. If he wanted to end that pledge, he could have asked me before the party. Why did he ask me, if ever, when I was drunk? He never asked me for sex while I was conscious, but didn't hesitate to have intercourse with me when he found me drunk and asleep. I believe I have and I have lost a kind of trust in him. I am thinking of ending my engagement with him. However, sometimes I think it might be an overreaction, and for the same reason, I am seeking your judgment. So, AITAH for refusing to cook for my pregnant SIL and telling her she has a husband who could do it. I, 41-year-old male, am a cook, and I refused to cook for my pregnant SIL and told her clearly that her husband should take on this job because he is also a cook. Background: I have been working as a cook at a famous restaurant in San Bernardino for 20 years. I am a seasoned veteran of the American culinary and serve as the head chef at the restaurant. 6 years ago, a new cook named Julian, now 29-year-old male, joined our team. I was a staunch believer in the classic American diner experience. However, Chef Julian, a fresh graduate from a prestigious culinary school, was eager to shake up the menu with bold flavors and international twists. The restaurant was gearing up for the 4th of July, planning a menu that would celebrate the nation's diversity. I proposed a BBQ brisket, paying homage to the heartland. However, Julian suggested a Korean BBQ burger, a blend of East and West. I saw Julian's idea as a departure from the restaurant's roots, so I strongly disagreed with him. Our differences soon turned into a dispute. However, the owner of the restaurant stepped in to mediate. He appreciated Julian's creativity, but emphasized the importance of maintaining our customers' expectations for classic American dishes. He also promised that the restaurant would introduce the Korean BBQ burger and some other dishes after Independence Day, and would feature a special dish of Julian's choice next year. At that time, Julian agreed, but after a week, he resigned from his job, saying he was not meant to be there. After leaving the job, he worked for 4 years for another restaurant, and now he owns his own restaurant. No doubt Julien is a good cook, but I think he is a haughty and egoistic person, and it is challenging to have a balanced relationship with him. Around 4 years ago, my sister-in-law, Evelyn, 28-year-old female, entered into a relationship with Julien. After dating for about a year, she decided to introduce him to her family. Let me clarify that at that time, Evelyn didn't know that I worked with Julien and had a fight with him, and I also didn't know she was dating him until she brought him to meet the family. One day, my CL called my wife, Sage, a 38-year-old female, and asked her to come with me home on the weekend because she had a surprise for us. I didn't expect such a call from her because we had never been so close. However, on the weekend, we went to my in-laws. Just before dinner, Julien came home and met all of us. I was surprised to see him there, but I didn't say anything. Instead, I met him cordially and told my in-laws that we had worked together 4 years ago. During dinner, Evelyn revealed that she and Julien had been dating for a year and announced that they were planning to get married soon. Honestly speaking, I didn't like this union, but I had to put on a happy face and congratulate them. After 3 months, they got married, and now my SIL is pregnant with their first child. I have been married to my wife for 13 years, and we have 2 kids together. I love to cook, but generally, we take turns cooking so that neither of us gets burned out or feels like it's a chore. This is especially helpful when we host others, because allergies are prevalent in both our families. However, when she was pregnant, I cooked for her all the time, because pregnancy was not easy for her, and I wanted her to be able to relax and enjoy food instead of being too tired and sick to eat, which is how she was in the very early stages of her first pregnancy. Everyone knew about it, but my sister-in-law expressed her disbelief that my wife was receiving a lot of attention and care from me during her pregnancy. She even seemed to find it surprising that a guy was doing that for his wife, and her constant remarks on this matter were irritating to me. So I asked her not to mention it again and again because I didn't like the remarks, as I felt like I was being called uxorious. She got offended and said that she would not mention it again. Now Evelyn is pregnant with her first child, and she called up out of the blue after her pregnancy announcement to say I should cook and send meals over for her, like I did for Sage. At first, I thought she was trying and failing to be funny. But nope, she was as serious as a heart attack. I clearly told her that I was not going to cook for her, and told her that it was very inappropriate to ask like that, and expressed my concern that she was demeaning me. She said she didn't mean that, and told me that we were family, and she is pregnant, and I should want her to rest as much as I had wanted Sage resting during both of her pregnancies. I found bother her request and argument weird, and told her that Sage is my wife, and I did all this for my children and my wife, and no one should expect the same from me. At the end, I told her that she had a chef husband who can cook for her if that was what she wanted. Instead of being ashamed, she told me her husband would never cook for her, and asked me to become a good BIL. In response, I said BL doesn't equal spouse, and then left for my home. After my refusal, Evelyn talked to Sage and asked her to convince me for cooking for her. My wife was surprised to hear such demand from her, as they had never been close, so my wife just rolled her eyes and told her where to go. After a week, we visited my in-laws. My SEL was already there, and she had told her parents that we both had refused to help her out, and that she was struggling and had just wanted help. They asked why I couldn't do it occasionally since Evelyn is too much of an ass to do it. I told them it was a lot to ask, and we weren't that close. When Evelyn realized her parents hadn't convinced me, or convinced Sage to convince me, she said I was an ass for not helping my family, and for rubbing her husband's lack of consideration for her in her face. I told her that I was not responsible for taking care of her or her husband babies. Initially, I thought she was asking me to cook for her on her own, but his persistent demands created a doubt in my mind that her husband might be behind all this, and that he might be trying to demean me by making me cook for her wife. When I investigated the matter deeply, a former employee of Julien, David, 21-year-old male, who was not happy with Julien's behavior, told me that he had overheard Julien talking to her wife on phone. He told me that Julien told his wife that he wanted to make me prove that I was just a cook, and traditional a trivial, and he was not only the owner of a restaurant, but a much superior chef, and that he wanted me to work for him. After learning this, I was shocked. Before that, I thought he was arrogant and ambitious professional, but this behavior of his proved that he is a very mean person. After learning the truth, I decided to confront him and went to his restaurant in the evening. When I met him, without going into details, I said, "I didn't expect such a shabby trick from you, Chef Julien." He seemed confused upon hearing this and asked me what I meant. I told him that he knew better than me what I meant. However, he claimed that he didn't know what I was talking about. I then explained the situation to him. He swore to GD that he didn't instruct his wife to ask me to cook for her, and he said he was unaware of his wife's request. He asked me to reveal who had told me all this. I told him that it was his former employee, David. He explained that he had fired David due to a conflict with another employee and believed that David was trying to defame him. Afterward, he invited me to have dinner with him, but I politely declined, and I called out to David and told him what Julien had said about him. Initially, he insisted that he was right, but in the end, he confessed that he had lied to me. As far as cooking for my 𝐒𝐓 is concerned, I still believe that I am not responsible for cooking for her, but I could cook once or twice for her because she has been requesting me multiple times. So, AITAH? AITAH for refusing to be quiet about my unwed pregnancy? I, 26-year-old female, am pregnant, and my boyfriend Benjamin, 27-year-old male, is the father. He comes from a conservative Jewish family, but he is not practicing himself. My family is also somewhat conservative, but not as much as his. My boyfriend and I have been living together for 2 years. We have a very stable relationship and have been planning to become parents for a year. And now, I am 6 months pregnant. Though I am not an influencer, I have been active on social media and have amassed 10K followers. Last month, I posted about the baby's arrival. When my parents found out about this, they didn't take it well because we are not married yet. However, my boyfriend's mother, Hannah, 56-year-old female, got very angry because I am not Jewish, and there would be issues about the religion of my child because Judaism is matrilineal. As my boyfriend is not a mama's boy, his mother, after failing to convince her son to announce that he does not have any relationship with me, reached out to me and asked me to keep quiet for some time, until she could arrange a marriage ceremony and then break the news to her family back in Wyoming. As we had already planned to get married, I agreed, until I realized she meant that I couldn't even appear to be pregnant in public. Since the post was already on social media, the news reached all of our and her relatives. Though we don't care what people think, Benjamin's mother was very upset. When she saw me in the maternity aisle at the nearby shopping mall, she scolded me because what if someone sees? I told her that it is our life and our choice, whether to show up pregnant in public or not, and also told her that we had not committed a crime, so we should not hide it from people. When I told my boyfriend about the encounter with his mother, he advised me to ignore her and continue posting whatever I wanted on social media. The next day, I posted another maternity picture showing my boyfriend kissing my belly. Just after 1 hour of posing the picture, I received a very angry call from my boyfriend's mother. She said that we were ruining the status of her family, and she was feeling embarrassed among her relatives because of us. My boyfriend has also been getting calls scolding him for being irresponsible, ouch. And so have I, but to a lesser degree. Now my boyfriend's mother is demanding that I apologize to her for making the announcement of my pregnancy before the wedding, and that I delete all my maternity pictures from all my social media accounts. I don't think it is wrong to announce your pregnancy and share maternity pictures on social media before the wedding, but my parents say it is my bad because I must have considered the fact that my would-be in-laws are conservative, and that posting such pictures against their will may create difficulties for me in the future. I believe my parents' opinion holds no water because I am an independent adult and have the right and freedom to make my own decisions. However, sometimes I feel uncertain. So, AITAH for refusing to be quiet about my unwed pregnancy? AITAH for regretting uniting my husband with his parents and son from his late wife? I, 33-year-old female, married my Indian boyfriend, Anand, 38-year-old male, 3 years ago. We got married without informing my husband's parents because they were against this marriage, as it was interreligious. However, we agreed to inform his parents about the marriage after having a baby, which we had after 1 year of the wedding. After the baby, Oliver, was born, I asked my husband to introduce me to his parents, but he was hesitant. When I continuously insisted, he told me that he had already informed his parents about the marriage, and they were not ready to accept it under any circumstances. However, I continued asking him, and finally he agreed, and we visited them. During our visit, They pretended that their minds had changed and welcomed us. At that time, they were living in Texas, but later they moved to New York and started living near our apartment. Initially, everything was going well, but things started to sour, and now we are on the verge of divorce. Background: I met him during our university years when I was pursuing my master's degree, and he was beginning his PhD at Columbia University. He had moved to the USA from India with his family 6 years earlier. He was living alone in New York while his family and his uncle's families managed their businesses in Texas. He had been married before, but his wife Shrishti died in a car accident. He had a son named Vikas from his late wife. He told me all this before proposing to me, and I think his honesty was what brought me closer to him. Over time, we fell deeply in love, and after some time, we decided to get married. I introduced him to my family, but he was reluctant to introduce me to his. When I asked why he was hesitant, he told me that his conservative parents would not accept our relationship easily because of my religion. I belong to a Christian family, though we are not practicing, and my husband belongs to a conservative Hindu family. However, he assured me that he would convince his parents and asked me not to worry about it. After a week, my boyfriend told me that his parents were not ready to give their permission for this union, but he reassured me that he loved me and would marry me at any cost. After many failed attempts to reconcile with his parents, we decided to get married without their permission and without informing them, and we agreed not to reveal the marriage to his parents for a year, or until we had a baby. We proceeded with our plan and had a small wedding ceremony, attended only by my family members and a few of his friends. Following the marriage, we, as a couple, moved to a rented duplex and began living there. After our wedding, my husband visited his parents only once, and he was out of contact with them, but he told me that he was in. After about a year, we had a baby boy, Oliver. After his birth one day, I asked my husband if it was time to meet his family. He replied with a disappointed face, "Let's see when we can visit." From that day on, whenever I brought up the topic of meeting his family, he would change the subject or brush it off. One day, I discovered an old photo album in my husband's drawer, filled with pictures of his family, parents, ex-wife, and his son. While I had seen some individual pictures of his family members before, I couldn't figure out the nature of his relationship with them. These pictures revealed a new perspective. All his family members had genuine smiles on their faces. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized how much my husband had sacrificed for our relationship. In the evening, I told him about the pictures and asked, "Why haven't you told your family about our marriage and introduced me to them? They must be missing you." My husband went silent for a while, and then reluctantly told me that he had already informed them, and instead of accepting it, they disowned him, refusing to accept an interreligious marriage at any cost. He felt there was no benefit in visiting them as it would be futile. After listening to my husband, my heart shattered, and at the same time, I confronted him for not telling me all this. I told him that I had taken him away from his family, but I wanted to rectify things by meeting his parents and by becoming a part of his son's life, and giving him a new mother, though a stepmother. Initially, my husband was hesitant to introduce me to his family, but when I continuously insisted, he agreed. One day we drove to his parents' house without informing them. After seeing us, his parents were shocked, and tears flowed down their cheeks as they hugged him tightly. They had been missing him, and their anger and disapproval had been replaced by sorrow and disappointment. Though hesitantly, they welcomed me too. My husband had a long conversation with his parents, and we also met his son. He was a silent boy with his father's smile and appearance. I even felt like calling him Anand Jr. We spent hours together playing board games, and I promised him that I would be his best stepmother. Over time, our visits became regular, and after around a year, my in-laws relocated to New York to expand their business there, and they started living next to our apartment. Though everything was okay in the beginning, my stepson started turning against me and my little son as he grew. Perhaps he wanted undivided attention. One day, he punched Oliver in the face because my son had taken his pencil box. I reprimanded my stepson for assaulting a child, but he retaliated and even used offensive language towards me, calling me a bitch. In the evening, I told my husband what had happened, but he said that they were both children and I should ignore such small things. For me, it was not a small thing. However, I ignored it. Today, I overheard my stepson telling his friend that my son Oliver was an out-of-wedlock child and the result of incest because he looks like my brother, Alex. I was shocked to hear this, as a 12-year-old boy should not talk this way. I doubted that he had overheard someone, my husband's parents perhaps, talking all this nonsense. I was so pissed off, but I didn't say anything to my stepson and retreated to my room. In the evening, I confronted my husband and told him what my stepson was saying about our son. He said that I was being petty and claimed that I might have heard wrong. It was not a trivial thing, because my stepson had accused me of incest and had questioned the paternity of my son. It was not something that I could ignore. He said, his son is also a kid, just 10 years old. How can he say all this? I told him that I didn't mean that this was his brainchild. Before I could end, he interrupted and asked, "Whose brainchild is it? What do you want to say?" "Your parents," I said, and told him clearly that I suspected his parents were still against me and wanted us to separate. After listening to this, his face turned red with anger, and he said, "I don't want to listen to a word against my parents and son," and told me that if I were not happy with them, I could proceed with a divorce, and he left the room without listening to me. It was shocking for me because it was the first time my husband behaved this way. Otherwise, he is a cool and calm person. When I came out of my room after almost an hour of that argument, I saw my husband was sitting in the yard of his parents' home, talking to them and enjoying some snacks. His son Vikas was playing with his cat nearby. They seemed to be a complete family, and there was no space where I could fit in. I felt like an outsider, an alien. Disappointed, I retreated to my room. It was the first time my husband behaved this way, and I am convinced that my husband's parents are behind it. I have also realized that it is my bad that I reunited him with his parents and son. If I hadn't, I would not be experiencing this situation. I regret reuniting him with his parents. So, AITAH for regretting? AITAH for getting angry with my mother when she suggested that my boyfriend and I sleep separately? I, 19-year-old female, have been in a 2-year relationship with my boyfriend Kevin, 22-year-old male. I am pursuing my graduation and live in my hometown of Vermont, but separate from my parents. My boyfriend works a full-time job in New York and visits me once a month. My mother, Melissa, 42-year-old female, apparently adores my boyfriend, but when it comes to our choices, my mom doesn't respect them. However, my father, Keith, 45-year-old male, is different. A chill gentleman. My mother often treats us like children, attempting to restrict our physical affection and insisting that we sleep separately when we visit my parents. I find this behavior frustrating. So, now I avoid visiting home with my boyfriend. However, recently, my father invited us to join a family trip to a lake house. Despite my reservations about visiting home with my boyfriend, I accepted the invitation, and we joined them. Everything was going well on the first day of the trip. But at night, the first night of the trip, I had an argument with my mother when she suggested that my boyfriend and I sleep with my younger siblings. I objected and told her that we are not children but a couple, and we need a separate room, and asked her that if there was no room available, we should rent an extra room in the same hotel or different. However, my mother insisted that there was no need for another room and asked us to follow her arrangement. I objected again, expressing that she always disregards our choices and freedom and treats us like children. We are two consenting adults, and my mother, or anyone else, does not have the right to force us to sleep separately. My mother said I am always focusing on sex, and that my thinking does not go beyond that. She also mentioned that it was a family trip, not a romantic safari, which made me very angry. I don't understand why, but my mother always tries to impose such instructions only on me. Interestingly, my brother, Henry, 21-year-old male, and his girlfriend got a separate room on the same trip, but there was no room available for us. Honestly, it is insulting and humiliating. When my older brother, John, and his wife, Emma, intervened, my mother, hiding her real intentions, said she was not against our choices, but it was due to the sleeping arrangements that she asked us to sleep with the children. I said she was lying, and told my brother that she intentionally made such sleeping arrangements so that we might not sleep together. I also told him that when I suggested renting a hotel for us, she also disagreed. Though my brother agreed that we, as adults, have the right to live the way we choose, he said I overreacted and should have handled the situation differently, in a better way. He also mentioned that I was ruining the trip for all of them. I did not expect such a response from my brother. By the way, at that time my father was on a walk. Otherwise, he would have sided with me. The truth. Disappointed with my mother and sister, my boyfriend and I left the hotel and rented a room in another one. When my father learned about the argument upon returning from a walk, he called me and asked me to return to join them again. He said that he was going to arrange a separate room for us, but I refused and told him sarcastically that we didn't want to spoil their trip. In the morning, we returned to the city, and the next month, we went on another trip alone as a couple. Before that night, I used to visit home once or twice a month, but now it has been 4 months since I last went home. My father has asked me multiple times to come home, urging me to forget what happened that night. However, my mother hasn't contacted me. Last week, when my boyfriend visited me, he suggested that I shouldn't take that argument too seriously and should visit home whenever possible. He also mentioned that perhaps my mother's suggestions were not wrong given the circumstances. Though I still believe that no one, not even my parents, has the right to dictate to us, I am confused and conflicted about my response to my mother's suggestions that night. So, AITAH for getting angry with my mother? AITAH for prioritizing my company's profit over the comfort of an LGBTQ individual? I, 42-year-old male, own a relatively large business with over 100 employees from all over the country. My 2 employees, Rob and Sam, are at the center of this situation. Rob, 31-year-old male, is my old employee with a heavy southern accent. Recently, he expressed his conservative views at a private party. Despite holding such views, he always keeps his personal beliefs separate from work and is a real professional. Sam, 28-year-old male, is gay from Indiana who wears a pride bracelet and had joined the company 2 months ago. Compared to Rob, he works 3 times less. When Sam learned about Rob's views on gays, he felt personally attacked and approached me, demanding that I fire Rob because his beliefs challenge and threaten his very existence. I sympathized with Sam, but explained that Rob expressed his views at a private event, not in the workplace. Additionally, Rob has made significant contributions to the company without affecting its culture. As long as an employee does not disrupt the workplace, personal beliefs should not be a concern. Everyone is entitled to their own thoughts, and we cannot dictate someone's beliefs. I also clarified to Sam that unless Rob openly discriminates against him or another employee, I cannot terminate him. While I do not agree with Rob's views, my priority is the company's success, and I am not here to dictate beliefs. Apparently, agreeing with my explanation, Sam left my office, but he was disappointed with me. Like Sam, there were some other members of the LGBTQ community in my company. Sam told them all about Rob's views and instigated them against him. During the lunch break, they had an argument with Sam, and they even threatened Rob to leave the job. It was strange for me as it is for you. You may or may not like them, but members of the LGBTQ community are commonly not extremists. At least in the USA, they are often the victims. When I came to know about this incident, I called Rob and all those who were involved in the argument with Rob. Before this, I had also called the HR to my office to get properly informed of the incident. Upon reaching my office, Sam and his friends asked me to terminate Rob from the job because they thought he was a threat to a positive work environment. I told them it was an overreaction toward Rob's personal views. When they started insisting on it, I terminated them instead of Rob. I told them that they were creating disturbance at the workplace, and I didn't want to let my office be a club of LGBTQ individuals. Honestly speaking, I neither support nor oppose the LGBTQ community. I want my workplace to be a positive and productive space, and I believe that employees should keep their personal views personal. And these issues must not be brought to the workplace. I told the same story to a friend of mine, and he said I am the AH for not making a member of the LGBTQ community feel safe at the workplace. But I don't think so. My company is not meant to make members of a particular community feel safe. I run the company for profit, and any employee that creates problems at the workplace should be removed. So, AITAH for prioritizing my company's profit over the comfort of an LGBTQ individual? AITAH for refusing to help my sister take care of our entitled wheelchair-bound mother? Last week, I, 25-year-old female, told my sister that I can neither take care of our wheelchair-bound mother nor send any money for her. My mom, Susan, now 59 years old, has never been a responsible parent in her life. She was abusive, narcissistic, an alcoholic, and a drug user. My dad, Henry, passed away when I was just 9 years old. My older sister, Katie, 42 years old female, moved out as soon as possible, but I was left alone with my mom. My childhood was marked by abuse and neglect. Just 2 months after my father's death, my mother, who was then 39, entered into a relationship with a man named Calvin, now dead. He was like a male version of her, psycho, alcoholic, and drug addict like her. She often used to leave me alone at home for days or even weeks while she went out of the city with her boyfriend. I didn't know how to cook, wash clothes, or keep up the home, but I tried my best to live and manage things alone. After 3 years of dating, my mother married her boyfriend, and he moved in with us at our home, and his moving in our home turned into hell. My mother and her husband would drink, eat, and mess up all over in the home, and there were parties at our home almost every weekend. The two alcoholics turned the home into a bar. One weekend, my mother went to have a party with her colleagues and left me at home with her husband, who was sick those days. When she left, he was asleep, but when he woke up, he asked me to bring him breakfast. I said I am not responsible for taking care of his stuff, and that I was busy studying. My refusal made him angry, and he slapped me in the face and pulled me towards him by gripping my chest and gave me another slap. I am not sure what he was going to do next, but I was doubtful of him. Before he could proceed, I managed to escape and ran out of the home, and I didn't come home until my mother returned. I am so pissed off that I think, why didn't I call the police at that time and complain about my stepdad's behavior? Had I done so, my life would have been very different. When my mother returned home in the evening, I told her what my stepfather had tried to do, expecting that she would stand for me, at least at this point. But she disappointed me. Instead of confronting her husband, she scolded me, saying that I was trying to distort her relationship with her husband. She also insisted that her husband was now my father, and that I should respect him. This was the day I genuinely started hating her, and promised to myself that I will move out as soon as possible, without considering the legal age, and would cut off all ties with my mother. At the age of 15, I joined high school where I met my soulmate, David. Now, he is my husband. He was the first student I met on the first day of school, and we became good friends in no time. And as time passed, our friendship blossomed into love, and our relationship was romantic, but not physical. After dating for 1.5 years, David introduced me to his parents, who are the nicest parents I have seen. After the first introduction, I started visiting them often, and there developed a strong bond with them, particularly with my boyfriend's mom. When she saw how neglected I was, she asked me about my situation. I told her what I was going through. After hearing my story, she got emotional and asked me to move in with them and promised that she would take care of me. Initially, I was hesitant because of the legal complexities involved in moving out before reaching 18, but I made the tough decision, thinking that if my mother tried to get me back, I would complain to the police about her abuse and have her sent to jail. After making a plan for what to do if my mother tried to get me back home, I moved in with my boyfriend's parents at 17. They are really nice people, and they did a lot for me, even going above and beyond. They arranged a separate room for me so that I could live comfortably and study in a peaceful environment. They also promised to take on all my expenses until I start earning. When my mother learned that I had moved out, she became very angry with me and asked me to return home. However, she didn't use any legal means to bring me back, as she was secretly happy about my moving out. Even though she was a neglectful parent, I was still her responsibility, and she would have to return home to check on me and see if I was alive. She also had to pay my school fees and bear other expenses. When I moved out, she had more money to spend on drugs and wine. She didn't talk to me for 3 years after I moved out. However, when her husband died 5 years ago, she contacted me and asked me to attend the funeral. I refused, stating that I hated him, the molester, and that he should go to hell from my side. Despite this, my sister continued to insist that I visit my mother because she was mourning and going through a difficult time. Eventually, I agreed and visited. We had dinner together and engaged in conversation, but I did so half-heartedly and out of obligation. Otherwise, I was well aware of the dark reality of my mother and her husband, the devil. After that, I didn't visit her for the next 3 years, but I knew what was going on in her life, and she also knew about my life, mainly through my sister. 2 years ago, my mother was in a car accident that left her permanently disabled and wheelchair-bound. After the accident, she moved in with her mother, my grandmother, and my sister takes care of her. Over the past 5 years, I have visited my mother 2 to 3 times, all of which were after her accident and due to my sister's insistence. Otherwise, I don't like her and even find it uncomfortable to refer to her as my mom because she's never been a mother to me. I often vocalize my disdain toward her in front of my sister, with whom I have a fairly good relationship. But our bond is not as close as most sisters have. It is because my sister does not see our childhood as abusive or neglectful. She says our mom did the best she could and did what most parents do for their children. However, the reality is that she doesn't know what I experienced as a child because she moved out just after the passing away of our father. In December 2023, my grandmother, with whom my mom was living, passed away. My uncle, William, 63-year-old male, inherited the house in the will, and he wants our mom to leave the house as soon as possible. He gave her $20,000 USD from the inheritance, but she has no place to live, no job, and spends her disability checks on meth and alcohol. Her health is deteriorating day by day. She has already wasted the money she got from Uncle William on drugs and scratch tickets, and now I am receiving random calls from her asking for money. I often ignore her calls because she is not my responsibility. Not only my mother, but my sister is also constantly sending passive-aggressive messages. You need to visit Mom. It can't be just me. Are you gonna help with Mom? I can't keep doing everything. Uncle says you guys need to help me. Blah, blah, blah. I live 2 hours away from Mom, and my sister is 15 minutes away, and she has taken it upon herself to care for Mom. I never asked her to do anything for her, and I'm sick of her trying to make me feel guilty. I have my own needs, and I cannot prioritize my mother over my own needs, particularly when she ignored me my whole childhood. I have a knee injury that needs surgery, and I can't drive or walk for extended periods of time. But my sister has been insisting that I should help her in taking care of Mom. Or at least I should send some money for her medical bills. Yesterday, I told my sister that I am injured and waiting for surgery and cannot send money for Mom, but she continued insisting. When it went beyond the limit, I told her clearly that I am not going to pay a cent for her, and that even if I were perfectly healthy, I would not send her money because she does not need it for medical bills, but for drugs. In this scenario, I don't care if she ends up in a homeless shelter or dies. My mother should be thankful to me because despite her toxic behavior and her husband's assault on me, I visited her 2 to 3 times, but she is being brazen and acting entitled. I am so upset with my mother and sister, and I am fed up with their demands. When I discussed the dilemma with my friend, Mona, she said that I should not behave this way with my mother and that I should take care of her, or at least send money for her bills, because after all, she is my mother. When I mentioned her drug addiction, my friend said she is almost on the verge of life, and we could not make her leave drugs. So, we should pay for what she says. I retorted, even for drugs? And she went silent, but while leaving, she said that I needed to grow up and learn to forgive, and that I was being a jerk in the case of my mother. I don't think I am wrong, but still I am confused. So, am I really the jerk?